Right. Well, just in honor of your time, we will go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining so far. Today, we are hosting this opportunity to dive into and explore Microsoft Copilot, and we're specifically going to be focusing on the experience that Copilot has in the GCC high environment. So we are curious what environment you're in, and we do have a number of other sessions we're hosting as well that will provide demonstration in alternate spaces. So feel free to look for those as well. And if you do have questions, let us know. But we'll talk a little bit about how to tell which environment you're in case you're unsure. So that all being said, again, thank you for joining. I know your time's valuable. My name's Larissa Cunningham, and I am a learning strategist with our Evolve 365 team at Planet Technologies. So I have had the amazing opportunity to work with a number of different organizations as they have rolled out Copilot and started using it internally. And my journey has been really rewarding, honestly. I will say that the tools that we're going to look at today are very accessible and they're very based on natural language. So the barrier to entry isn't necessarily there, but that doesn't mean it's not going to require a learning curve. It is a different workflow. And so we want to provide as many resources to you or the people that you work with to make the most out of this, since it can be such a big change in the way that we approach our daily tasks. So all of that being said, let's talk about what we're going to focus on here today. So our agenda is to just make sure that we're all on the same page about what Microsoft Copilot is. And then we're going to talk about how to access it, some of the different navigation features to look for, and we'll do some demonstration in the GCC high environment for you. And then we'll go into how to create prompts. This is the core of how you're going to interact with this generative AI tool. So being able to learn to master prompting is going to be a huge benefit and time saver for you. So as we go throughout this session today, we're going to talk about a number of different use cases and some different tips and tricks. But if you have questions along the way, please feel free to put those in the chat, and we will also save some time here at the end as well. So just to get us started, it does look like, based off of some of the responses you've shared so far, some of you are somewhat familiar with Copilot or some of these AI tools and you've tried it, but aren't necessarily at the point where you're using it regularly. So for those of you who are still newer to it, Copilot is a generative AI tool, and it's leveraging the advanced capabilities of the main public tools that you may have heard of, but it's actually implemented into the Microsoft environment. So we are going to be able to start doing things like catching up on some of those documents that are getting shared with us that are longer, and maybe we're searching for specific details. It's also going to help us when we're creating brand new content, whether that's something you're sharing externally or internally with your colleagues. It's going to be a higher polish, and you're going to have just a quick brainstorming buddy next to you anytime you need it. So we're going to be able to do things like create new presentations, articles, improve our emails, and there are a lot of benefits here. Now, I do want to emphasize that there are a lot of generative tools out there. Copilot is specifically built within the security environment of Microsoft, and regardless of what tools are there, using any non-approved AI web services could potentially risk exposing personal or confidential data to the public. So we don't want to do that, and we'll talk about how to ensure that you're operating in a secure manner when you're working with Copilot. And I appreciate, Jennifer, I apologize. I do have a wonderful crew here with me that are here to support your questions as well. So please don't hesitate to share those in the chat if anything comes up during our session today. All right, so a couple of characteristics of any generative AI tool that I want to highlight. These are going to have an impact on your experience. The first is hallucinations. And true story, the first time I heard the term hallucination in regard to this tool, I actually laughed. I thought it was just a parallel, but this is the actual term for when a AI tool produces really convincing, well-crafted, but incorrect or inaccurate responses. So at the end of the day, this is still a tool that is based off of learning our patterns, and it's predicting what you're going to want. So it's a tool, but it's not perfect, and you are still always going to be in the driver's seat to make sure that it's operating the way you expect it to. The other element to highlight is that this is one of the most rapidly evolving and changing tools that we have. So, truthfully, the experience you have today will be the least advanced we'll use because there are constant developments happening. There are constantly new features, and Microsoft, especially, is always trying to release additional elements that are going to help improve your experience. So, keep that in mind. If you have worked with any of these and it's changed since the first time you worked with it, be patient with yourself. It is constantly changing, and we're all doing our best to keep up with it, even as someone who operates and works with it daily. So I do want to talk a little bit about the data protection you're going to have when using Copilot. This is true in general when you sign in with a organization account. So when you sign in with that work account, it is going to automatically activate the enterprise data protections to ensure that your data doesn't see any other human eyes. It's going to be encrypted. And there are elements that are going to have a conversation history so that you have a better experience, but it's never going to leave your environment and your tenant, and it will have the same security that the rest of your Microsoft tools do inherently. So this is going to be personally exclusive. You're not training the model on any level here. So it's never leaving. It's not learning from the conversations you're having, which ensures that your data is never leaving and it's always protected. So let's talk a little bit more specifically about GCC high security commitments. So in general, when you are in any organization, you are going to have that enterprise data protection with Copilot, regardless of the experience, whether it's licensed or not. When you're in a GCC high environment, though, there are additional security commitments that are bound with this tool. So that means typically this are groups that are working with defense industrial base organizations that are handling controlled unclassified information or other kinds of things like that. So it's important that it follows all of those compliance standards, and things like it's only going to be screened by citizens in the US. The data is never leaving US boundaries. There is zero tolerance for any of that data leaving. So all of those requirements are being met. And what that does mean for you and your experience is that different features are going to roll out slower to your environment. So you might see people sharing different things that they do with Copilot and wonder why you don't see some of those features or capabilities in your experience. And this is typically why. So that is all there for your protection, and you typically see these come down the road. It's just slower. So getting started, if you haven't come here before, the easiest way to get to Copilot is going to be through the main login experience, and the address, I'll actually share it here in the chat, but I do want to note, I think there is an outage today, so if this link doesn't work, you can save it and try it on another day. We are going to also see a couple other places that we can access Copilot, because the point here is to fit into your natural workflow. So there are going to be multiple entry points that hopefully make it easy depending on the applications you're more consistently in. So we will be looking at a non-licensed experience today. Just in case anyone does have an elevated license and you see additional features, we won't be going into those in detail. Now, when I talk about Copilot being a different workflow, what I want to kind of call us back to is that idea that many of us are used to when working with search engines, where we're trying to consolidate a really big thought into maybe 4 or 5 words. Copilot's far beyond that search experience. So it is designed to act like a colleague for you that you can discuss, share your ideas, provide full context, and you can continue that conversation if it doesn't understand you the first time. So this is what's going to allow us not just to get quick summaries, but get explanations, help us understand and gain insight, maybe find if there are some gaps in the original analysis that we were doing. It gives you a collaborative partner despite what your colleague's schedule might look like. So again, I can't emphasize enough why we're talking about Copilot specifically when there are so many generative AI tools out there now. I want to emphasize that Copilot is constantly being developed and worked on and using the latest advanced models when it's creating that development. So regardless of how you use it, it's built on the latest models that are being developed in the background. There's also very easy source transparency. Typically, I don't have to do any extra work, and Copilot will automatically start sourcing its data in the responses that it's giving me. Now, if I've provided it a document, it usually uses that document as a source, but it will still reference the document and help me ensure that what I'm creating follows what I expected it to. And I will say, if you ever are working in a conversation with Copilot and it doesn't automatically provide your sources, simply asking for it in a follow-up prompt will usually trigger that full citation of where it's pulling those answers from. There is no knowledge cutoff as well. I do want to throw the caveat on here that there are times when certain organizations will limit your ability to search the web in real time. If that is turned off, you usually have a notification about it, and it will use the foundational information it was trained on to respond to you, and that might adjust how we think about this knowledge cutoff. But if it's enabled and you are able to research on the web as well as a data source, that means that you're constantly getting up-to-date information and you're not limited to the last moment that model was trained. And then last but not least, simply because I can't say it enough, the data protection is here inherently in your experience. So there are a couple signs we'll look for when we actually get into our demo here, but to give you a sneak peek, this is what your experience should somewhat look like for Copilot Chat. Regardless of where you're accessing it, you should be able to see a conversation history. You're going to have that main prompt text box. I do want to emphasize here, I'm noticing right now, I don't currently have suggested prompts available in the GCC High environment. I'm hoping that comes soon, but I'm not in control of that. So if those come in the future, that's where they will be. And then the new chat option is always going to be in the top right corner. Now, the benefit of these conversations is as you chat with Copilot, this conversation is contextual, which means it's pulling from every element of your prompts and all of the responses it's given you to continue to improve its feedback. So if you ever change topics, I highly recommend getting familiar with that new chat button and clearing the context, starting over with a brand new conversation. So It's pretty easy at that point. You're just going to enter your prompt, and then when you get your response back, your job is to validate the information given to you, check those sources, and click on them if they're a link, and then just continue the conversation. Let it help you throughout a process rather than thinking of it as a static step. All right, so I do want to jump over here into my demonstration area, and I'll highlight two things here. So if you tried that link I gave you, you might be seeing an error right now. So what I am doing instead is actually going to my Outlook on the web, and on the left-hand navigation over here, I do see Copilot. So if you don't see that, you may be able to search for it in the applications available. I will say we're constantly rolling out changes, so if you see differences, that is likely why. So when we get here, this looks a little bit more plain than what I just showed you in my screenshot. And so I want to emphasize that this icon here in the corner is your navigation. So if I expand that, that's where I see the chats option, and I'm going to see my conversation history as well. This history does follow your normal retention policies, so it's not forever, but it does allow you to jump back into previous conversations, continue off of the context you've already built, and it's pretty easy to then pull from those and build from that. What I will say is you can rename these. I just want to show this as a tip. So if you see this 3-dot menu next to your conversation, you can rename those if it's a chat you know you're going to reference. Personally, I tend to just put an asterisk next to it if I can. This one might be a little long right now, but you can name it something that is just easy for you to tell. Whoops, I can't type and talk. Easy for you to tell what that topic was about. And then when you save it, it's easier to find in your history. Now, if I go all the way down to the end of that list, you should see all conversations as well. And this gives you a searchable experience. By default, it's going to show up in chronological order of your conversations, but the search will allow you to pull through key phrases or topics you were talking about. So let's come back to chat here, and we are going to work here mainly today, but I'll point out the new chat icon up in the top corner. This clears that slate, and this little green shield with a check mark is going to tell you you're signed in with your work account and you have enterprise data protection. So there is a link here if you want to learn more about that, but those are the security features that we've been discussing so far. So I want to pause here and see if we've had any questions so far that we want to call out from the chat. All right, looks like we're pretty up to date. So I'm going to move on to the next topic. I've alluded to this already. Context engineering is really just a fancy way of saying treat AI like a new team member. So we're going to imagine that Copilot is a new colleague of ours, and just like any new team member, they don't know right off of the bat the context, the background, and all of the projects you're working on. So consider that when you're trying to request a task to be assisted with in these chats. So rather than just saying, hey, please provide this information, we want to build the picture around that. So tell Copilot what you're going to use that information for. Maybe you're creating a resource document for your team and you need to provide some frequently asked questions and anticipate what they're going to need. That will then help color the picture for how Copilot responds to you. So any relevant information and clear instructions, if there is a specific persona it should approach the task with, are there formats that you need to follow? Is there an audience you're specifically trying to reach? And then do you have any boundaries that it needs to stay within? Maybe you have a specific source document you want it to research, or maybe you're only looking for something from the web and nothing that you actually have a source for. What are the boundaries around this topic? So again, we want to talk to it just like we would any other colleague, but It does take a little bit of practice, so we'll have some of that opportunity to do together today. All right. So I do want to emphasize I did see some comments in the chat. I was having some issues as well this morning. So if you have access to Outlook on the web, or the other place you can try is in your Teams area, I was personally able to add Copilot as an application. So I'm here in Teams, and I actually searched for Copilot in my applications here, and I added it to my navigation on the side. So while there is that outage, if you are able to access it this way, it will hopefully allow you to follow along as we work today. So this is in Teams that I'm showing right now. All right, so let's go ahead and just start off with a really simple prompt. I want to kind of show the value of being able to reference your actual documents. So we're going to start off and just ask for a quick summary here. And one of the tips that I will give while prompting in Copilot is that / typically allows you to search your cloud documents. So it's not going to inherently have access to anything in here, but it makes it easy for you to search your OneDrive or shared locations that you might want to pull from. The other way to attach those documents is to click this little plus icon at the bottom of your prompt area, and we can add things that are already in OneDrive. That's what we did earlier. The other option is you can actually upload something from your device as well. This is something I personally do when I export some data and it goes to my downloads folder. I haven't had a chance to put it in OneDrive yet, so I might just directly upload that file. Let's go ahead and pull from just one of our documents here. I have a standard operating procedure, and I just want to hear what the key points are. So I gave it the context to work with here. It becomes a link. So if I want to open it and review the document myself, I can. And pretty quickly, it's coming back with some feedback. So there's usually a conversational element to begin with. So however you phrase that question, it usually responds to you like a colleague would as well. And then it gives you its resources down here. So this was a quick summary. As we kind of scroll through here, it's pulling through my definitions, the responsibilities, and it looks like it's just a shortened version of that document. Now, if I get all the way to the very end, you'll notice if it's still generating, some of the features are going to pause for you until it's complete. When it finishes, you'll see typically some suggestions for keeping that conversation going. So in here, it's saying, this is what I've done so far. These might be next steps for you. Do you want some help? Now, even though I referenced a document, I want to emphasize this sources portion at the very end. When I open that, it's going to tell me where it pulled this information from. So if it had searched the web, it would have pulled those references in, but it limited its response to the document I attached. You'll also notice above your prompt text box that you'll get some contextual suggestions for continuing this conversation. So these actually relate pretty similar to the suggestion at the end here, but I don't have to type anything. I can just click on this. It will put that start to my prompt, and I can continue to customize it, add additional context or requests here, but it gives me that jump start. So we'll go ahead and send that on. And those are going to change based on your particular topic and what's going on in your conversations. So I personally find it really helpful because sometimes it suggests an area that I didn't consider including Copilot in. All right, so as we're going to scroll down here, again, it just followed that prompt area, and now we have some different suggestions here. Now, something that does show up when you're engaged in an active conversation is right next to these suggested prompts. You should see a little box with a star or sparkle on it. This is the prompt gallery. So you can actually use this for inspiration as you're getting started and see a number of different things you can include Copilot in. If you're unsure, feel free to filter by the tasks here. Maybe you're looking to catch up because you've been out of the office. Maybe you're looking to learn and expand in a different tool or area. If you don't filter it, you can simply search through all of these suggestions that are listed here. And if you like any of them, look for this little bookmark icon. That will actually save the pre-created prompt to a second tab here, so it's easier for you to find in the future. So if I come over to this Your Prompts tab, you're going to see you can save your own prompts. This actually has my icon next to it, and this is the one we just saved. It was created by Microsoft. So you can easily I was going to say unsave, but you can remove them. And if you start to get too many or you're not using them anymore, you can clean this area up as you need to. So I am going to show how to save one of those prompts for yourself. So we're going to scroll all the way to the top. What you're going to do is, whether it's a historical conversation or the one you're in right now, if you've taken time to build out a really quality prompt, like this beautiful short prompt I have right here, you're going to find the prompt you want to save and hover over it. And right above it, you should see a bookmark icon appear, which will allow you to save that. This is where you get to name it. So we'll just name this key points. There is a 35 character limit, so keeping it short and sweet is helpful. And then we simply hit save. So now that's going to be saved to my prompt gallery here. Again, right now to access that, you are going to want to be in an existing conversation. So here's my prompts, and here's what we just created. And again, if you decide you no longer need it, we'll simply hit remove and it will disappear from your prompt gallery. All right, so this kind of gives you an idea of how it starts to function, but let's use it in a couple of different ways now. So I'm going to go ahead and start a new chat, just so it doesn't mix up these two topics, and we're going to have it help me create a really professional email. So what I'm going to do is tell Copilot the context around this email and have it pull something together that is a little bit more professional and polished for me. So I did rewrite this so you don't have to watch me stumble through typing, but here I'm just saying my colleagues, Callum and Sophia, recently attended an industry trade show, and I'm essentially wanting to create a congratulatory message. And towards the end, I want to thank them by taking them out to lunch. So all of that context is helping Copilot understand your existing situation, and we're going to go ahead and hit send. So pretty quickly, it came back with a polished message, and because I told it it was an email, it even gave me a subject here at the top, so I don't have to think through how to name that. So now I can read through this, see if it fits what I'm looking for. It pulled in my information just from my account, so I didn't have to specify how to end that message. And at this point, we can decide if it meets what we're looking for. Maybe we want to make some adjustments. Maybe we want it to be more formal, more motivational, or perhaps we decide we're actually putting this in a Teams post. So you can then make adjustments at this point. So let's go ahead and we'll say, make it excited but professional. So because I already have the context built in this chat, I don't have to continue to reiterate, this is for Sophia and Callum, or this is the context. It has all of that information already. So it's now changing this and saying, okay, here's some more enthusiastic verbiage. I can read through this. And then at the very bottom, we do have an option to fully copy this response. I do want to let you know this is going to copy to your clipboard and it will include the conversational elements. So just be on the lookout for that and ensure you delete them if they're not part of the final product you want to keep. But it makes it very easy to turn your conversations into actual products you are building. All right, so let's come back really quick, and I do want to talk about prompting since this is the core of your experience. So there are a couple of things that make something really effective, and the more specific and detailed you are, the better Copilot can respond. Full sentences, instructions, if you need a specific format or things like that, these are all going to be benefits to you. Um, there may be some easy follow-up prompts to change tone or adjust formatting and things of that nature. But if you include that up front, you're going to get your feedback closer to that final format that you need much faster. And as fun as Copilot is to chat with, I want to save you time. So the better we get at prompting, the shorter these conversations need to be, and the quicker you can get back to the areas you really want to be spending time on. Now, if we continue to use vague or just a couple of words, kind of like I did actually in the first prompt, if there's no context or output, it's going to give you vague responses. So if you think about that original prompt I used to give me a summary, think about how much better it could have been if I'd said, summarize this for my leadership in 5 bullet points so that I can send an email updating them on the progress we've made. That's going to yield a vastly different response than just summarize this document. So there is no wrong way to prompt. Natural and conversational language is absolutely welcome. And ultimately, you do need to just experiment and begin chatting with Copilot to understand the things that will become more and more valuable. So that's my number one tip, is just trial and error and starting to get used to what that experience is like. So when you're thinking of crafting prompts, there are a couple of elements I would encourage you to consider adding. And the first is a persona. So how are we having Copilot actually approach the task? Are we approaching it as an expert scientist, or are we a member of the general public that may not be as familiar with some of the more technical jargon? How are we approaching this? The second, and this is in my opinion the most important, you do need to clearly state what you're expecting to be accomplished. Are we answering a question? Are we summarizing something? Or are we actually generating a full email or report? If it's unclear what the task is meant to accomplish, it's much less likely you're going to get the result you hoped for. The next is very closely tied to the task, but not always explicitly stated. And that's the format you need this in. So if you need a bulleted summary, that looks different than a paragraph that summarizes a topic. If you need a table that presents the results you're looking for, that might be more beneficial for you to walk away with than a, again, a paragraph list that you have to take away and turn into a task list. So what's the format you're looking for? And then consider the audience that will be using what you're producing. Is it solely for you to learn, or are you creating something that will be shared with leadership and needs to have a very polished professional tone? Is it for the experts on your team that need to really understand complexity here? Who are we tailoring this message to? And then if you haven't already included this portion, again, that tone changes the verbiage. It changes the approach and sentiment that comes through in that. So if you have, even if it's a very simple, I want this to be professional, that tone is helpful to include. But you can get really specific with this. There are times when I personally have needed something professional, but I needed to add a sensitive element to it and be considerate of the experience the person I'm sending this to is having. So you can start to layer a complex situation together and get a more tailored tone. So if you use all those elements, your prompt could look something like this. This is by no means the only way to format your prompt, but it gives you a good starting point to fill in the blanks. And then when you're done, you might see additional context you can still include. So for example, if we are producing something for communications, maybe we're saying, as a communications officer in a public health department, that's our context here, we want to draft a press release summarizing the outcomes of our, this new thing that we're working in, right? And so as we start to build this out, we're adding in the framework of the task we're working in and clarifying who that audience is and so forth. So this is just kind of an idea. We can do summaries. We can actually draft some of our internal communications. We can create learning assessments. We can start to brainstorm ways to improve engagement, both with our team or broader organization, or the people we work with that are external to us. So I'm going to leave this on the screen just for a moment to give you some different ideas of how we can go about this. But then we're going to go back to my demonstration area and try a couple additional scenarios. So while we're here on this screen, I do just want to pause and see if there were any questions we wanted to address in the chat, or if anyone wants to raise their hand and clarify any of the points we've talked about so far.
I think we're caught up with chat, Larissa, so if no one raises their hands, I think we're ready to keep going.
Awesome. Sounds good. And I'm going to go ahead and jump back over here to my demo area. And again, I'm accessing Copilot in Teams right now. So I'm not going to continue on this email that we need to adjust. I'm going to go ahead and select a new chat here. And we're going to assume that I am actually part of our IT team, and we're implementing a bring your own device policy. So I'm going to incorporate Copilot from the very beginning. So I love using it to brainstorm and think through things. So in this instance, I'm going to send this off so it can start generating and you can see the full prompt. But I said, assume that you're an IT director. So that's the persona we want to approach this with. And we specialize in cybersecurity. We are working on creating a bring your own device policy. And I want to make sure that we're in compliance with company standards and keeping everyone safe, essentially. So I'm saying this is very conversational. I could be more direct and say draft this, but I tend to have a friendlier approach when I'm working with Copilot. And I'm just saying, please draft a professional policy that includes sections on eligibility, security requirements, and acceptable use. So this is a more in-depth response it's coming back with. And here's my conversational element. And we're going to scroll down a little bit. So this is going to give me a quick preview telling me which version we're looking at. And this is a great place to point out that if I had any internal policies that I wanted to ensure it incorporated with its feedback here, I could absolutely include that in my initial prompt. So we'll add a document here in a moment, but this is giving us a broad overview of what we're looking at. So it's telling me a purpose, giving me some scope and definitions. And this is now my opportunity to consider if there's anything I see missing. With my personal expertise in this area, I can decide if there are sections that we forgot to include or limitations we didn't list here. So we're going to scroll all the way down here, and I might want to check before I move forward. I'm noticing that there aren't any resources it's pulling from. So it's just kind of pulling through its best judgment here. So let's scroll all the way down. This is quite a bit of information, and I'm just going to say, please provide the sources that validate the requirements listed. All right. This is why I try to minimize my typing. I'm terrible when someone's watching. All right, so we're going to look for additional sources here, and it's going to tell me kind of where those come from. So I am having it reach out to the web right now, and you'll notice that I started to see these little numbers appear right next to the responses. So as you start to go through and validate this for yourself, you can actually click on these, make sure that they are web sources that are approved or you can ensure are accurate. And if they're not, we'll just prompt again and give more definition around the types of sources we can cite. So I can now read through all of these. This is probably going to be relatively long, so we're going to scroll all the way to the bottom here. And at the very end, you are going to see a full list of all of the cited sources. So some of the responses I get back from Copilot list, I don't even have a number off the top of my head, but you'll see here we have 15 different sources and a number of different areas as well. So this is one of the ways it makes it really easy for you to validate and verify what you're working with. So if we're happy with this and we've ensured this sounds good, let's go ahead and continue our conversation. So I'm not going to use these suggestions. I want to move forward with building out that outline. So I'm going to say, I might even say, great, can you please add the information to support clear user responsibilities here? So it's going to give me an updated section I can add in here. I would need to go through and copy that original response, or I can actually prompt Copilot to give me the full feedback with this included if I wanted to. So now I can read through this portion, and we're including the limitations and expectations for the people that are going to be involved in this. So let's keep going down. It might take a little bit to respond. I sometimes get impatient, but I do try to remember it is producing a lot of information and pulling a lot of data all at once. So the more complicated the ask, the longer it may take to get the full result generated. All right. So it looks like we're coming close to the end here. If you do ever get to a point where you realize it's generating something that is not at all what you're looking for, you may have noticed that stop generating option. That does allow you to say, oh, nope, let's not waste our time with this. Let me try again. And I will say, for me personally, if I'm in a chat and I'm not getting what I'm looking for, my first course of action is to start a new chat. And I just start again from scratch. I try some rewording and reapproach the conversation. That for me has yielded some of the quickest turnaround in results. All right, so I like what's here. We're gonna go ahead and say that I read through all of that, even though you saw me scroll right past it. And we're going to say, great, this is a great outline. I want it to draft this full policy for me. And I'm actually going to include our existing IT policies. So I'm going to hit that / and I don't immediately see it. So I'm going to start typing the name of the document. And here we see our Contoso IT policies. Here are our current policies for reference. All right, so I'm going to send that off now. So now I've given it an additional resource. It now knows what our internal policies to incorporate are. And I do want to highlight this. If you're ever working with Copilot and you see this option at the top where you can choose which version you're experiencing, Copilot can give you quicker responses and more immediate feedback, but it won't be able to reach out as far and reason over as much information. So for some things, that's absolutely fine. But for others, we want it to really think through and understand our policies in this case. And we want to ensure a quality response. So it will take longer, but it typically yields much more comprehensive results. So you'll notice this is taking a little bit longer, but it's at least giving me kind of this update as it goes along and tells me where it's at in the reasoning process. So right now it's going to go ahead and give me that draft. This is kind of where we started earlier, but I'm actually seeing these references as well. These are to my policies. So this is now more personalized. So again, we're going to read through this always, but if we're happy with it, let's go ahead and see if it's finished generating here. All right. And this is kind of what I mean here when I say it's more comprehensive, it's more in depth. And because we had our own internal references, it's now going to be tailored to the existing verbiage and terminology that we were using. So you'll notice it's now referencing Contoso here. It's kind of pulling in from what we've already built. So it's giving me a couple notes at the very end and kind of telling me how it aligns and what it tried to include. But I now want to see if it will actually turn this into a document for me. Okay, so let's go ahead and say create this as a Word document. Use Calibri font. Whoops. And make the headings a red text. Let's just see how it does. I have had some mixed results when having it fully create a document. And I've had some people who've come to me and said, hey, I asked for it to create this document. It was listed in my initial prompt, and what came through wasn't exactly what I looked for. So my tip in this moment would be to ensure that you already approved of the information that was shared, which is why we did it this way. We're layering this together. And once I was happy with it, now I'm going to see if it can actually turn this into a document. Again, you always have the option here to copy the full response. In this case, I do think it will actually copy my hyperlinks. So once you've validated them, if you need to reprompt Copilot to remove those links, that might be a cleaner copy for you and easier for you to tailor. All right, this usually does take a minute, but we'll go ahead and give it a second. Now, I do want to, I see kind of that question of if you've been able to prompt along with me, and I apologize, I meant to share this prompt here in the chat. So if you want to start exploring at least this use case and see how it responds to you, your responses will be different than mine. Just by nature of this generative element, I would be very surprised if it came back with even similar wording. So keep that in mind as well when you send one prompt. I have started a new chat and sent the exact same thing and received very different results. So I do see the comment here that yes, there is an outage with the main home area, but if you are able to access Copilot via the Outlook application or Teams, you may be able to pull up the Copilot features here and follow along. But if you're running into issues, I absolutely understand that. All right. Okay, it looks like some of you don't see that option. Hopefully that does come through. All of these updates that you might see on my screen might look different for you just with the way that those updates come through. So I appreciate the patience with the outage, and hopefully we'll have some tools here for you to take away once that's resolved. All right, so we're going to go ahead and cross our fingers. Let's see how Copilot did with this document. You should see a download option when it allows this, and it will go directly to your downloads area. So that's opening on a separate screen for me. I will pull that down in just a moment when it finishes loading. All right, so this is what we received from Copilot, and you'll notice my headings are in red. And let's go ahead and enable our editing and look at our home area. Whoops, let's go ahead and keep that down. So we're going to go ahead and always show my ribbon here. All right, my main area does look like it followed a Calibri font, just like I asked for it to. It changed my headings to be that red text. So I will say if you don't include specifics like that, you'll likely get a very generic starting point, which is a great jump start. But if you do know some of those details, including that element in your instructions will improve the production that it pulls through. Every once in a while, it still doesn't pull through exactly as you expect it to. So again, that's when I just reapproach the task and try again. All right, so this is that start of a document. Of course, if we have a different template we need to put it into, we can start leveraging those as well. But the jumpstart and me not having to fully type all of this out or research each of these individually drastically spread up this process. And now I can start to take this to my leadership. So I'm going to just go ahead and I need to inform my leadership about some of these changes. So we're going to continue on in this conversation. Again, I like the context that's already built, and I'm just going to have it summarize the policy changes for our executive leadership and approval. Um, give me the bottom line up front and include bullet points for the details. So the more specific, the better it will be, but hopefully this gives you an idea for how you can start to approach and tailor for your audience. So I made clear it was our executive leadership. So we gave our bottom line up front here. And then if they want to see more details, we're going to list those key policy highlights and give them a bullet list that will be a quick read for them. So now I'm taking this a step further and moving towards implementing. So my goal with this demonstration is to show that Copilot came in handy from the very beginning when I was brainstorming and mapping out the plan. And then I actually turned it into something I can create as a full document. And as I need to collaborate with others, it can help me reframe the changes we're making and the adjustments that are needed so that we can quickly achieve some of those needed adjustments as we move forward. So we have all of this. You can copy and paste sections of it or this full response and then turn that into an email. So that does highlight a lot of what I wanted to demonstrate today. I do want to give you a couple of additional things to keep in mind. So there are some prompting tips and tricks that I've personally used quite a bit, and they give you a different way of tackling a task. So while it's great if you can paint a full picture of the context that you have, you can also ask the tool to ask you questions in response. So I've actually done this on a personal level as well, where I was researching a new device I wanted to buy, and I wasn't sure what specs to look for and how they'd impact me. So I told Copilot what was important to me and how I used that tool. And then I said, ask me some questions for what else I might not have considered. And it asked, I don't even remember how many at this point, but a number of questions. I filled those all out in one prompt. And then the tailored search results and my ability to understand what I was looking at as I was, browsing made a huge difference. So having it ask you questions back can help fill in some of the gaps you might not have considered including. When I'm brainstorming, I do often ask it to give me multiple options. I like to see different ways of phrasing things and different terminology that might help. So asking it to give you 2 or more options will help so that you don't have to continue to say, well, give me a different example. Showing your work is going to be something where we're trying to understand how it's reasoning over the information it's received. So especially as you're doing analysis, you can have it just try to help you see the steps that it took. If you're working with a document and need to create an FAQ, admittedly, these would be anticipated questions unless you are sharing some actual data for the questions you have. But this can be an easier way for some of the people you're sharing this with to approach the topics that might sound more complicated in its full description. And that question and answer format is sometimes easier to broach. And last but not least, there is absolutely that option for if you're still getting used to prompting, have the tools you're working with help you create that prompt. Ask those clarifying questions and don't be afraid to take something really large and turn it into smaller steps. This is something I do quite frequently just to ensure I have oversight over every element of what I'm building. So that does kind of bring me to the end of what I wanted to highlight. Keep a growth mindset as you're working with these tools and as they're being introduced into your workflow. AI is moving really fast, and we're all trying to keep up with it, but that means it's progressing and constantly improving. So that's what we're going to look to do, focus on progress and not perfection. So I want to go ahead and turn the time over to any questions that we may not have answered or that you were looking forward to hearing about. Feel free to put those in the chat or raise your hand. And I'll just emphasize that here at Planet, we want you to have all of the confidence in the world with long-term rollouts and new tools. So if you need any assistance with Copilot or any other Microsoft tools, we would love to help you. Feel free to reach out to us. And we just appreciate you taking the time to join us today.